We're back and talking about what happens after the loan is funded, right?
Hooray!
So we talked about the life cycle of a loan. We talked about, from start to finish, what's actually happening. But once you've given that money and now you're just waiting, what does that look like? We're going to talk about management of assets, the basics of that. We're going to talk about monitoring the loan and the project as opposed to micromanaging the project and the borrower. And we'll talk about some systems that can reduce your stress along the way. Now, a lot of this needs to happen on the front end. I hate to say it. I know. It's always at the beginning, instead of being reactive, being proactive, but a lot of times that's what it is, right? So the big key here is communication. What have you and the investor or borrower decided on in terms of communication for this project, right? I like to use the fix and flip example because this is the area that I lend in, but I have an understanding with the borrower before any money is given. Okay, so really doing the due diligence process and also written in the contractual documents. What is this going to look like? How often should I expect updates? This is something that we agree on. For me, I'm good with once a week. What's going to be the format of those updates, right? Is it going to be a phone call? We're going to be on Zoom? You're going to send me a report? You got a database or a software or a dashboard for me to look at? What does that look like? And then another thing is what happens and how fast do you communicate if something is not going according to plan? And this is really important to establish ahead of time because more often than not, something goes wrong, right? I mean, that's just life, really. So understanding how that's going to be handled is going to significantly reduce your stress throughout the life of the loan, okay? And the more you can keep communication lines open, the better it's going to be. It can be extremely stressful when, let's say your borrower was supposed to make a payment on Monday and you haven't heard from them. You've reached out. It's now Friday. Nothing, right? You've texted, you've called, you've emailed. You see nothing. And it can be even more stressful if, you have a connection on social media, you haven't seen a post, you're just like, whoa, like, is this person okay? Now, those are things to talk about ahead of time with your borrower so that you're not in that frantic mode. Okay. I see tons of private lenders who are new to the industry freaking out, just because the borrower hasn't responded to them in 2 days, right? Like things like that. Okay. So really set those expectations ahead of time with the borrower so that you're not freaking out and you have a plan for when those things happen. Okay. Now, asset management. Okay. This is going to be very different in the equipment space than it will be in the real estate space. Now, I can't just pick up a house and walk off with it. Well, for the most part. I mean, now they got these modular homes and these Amazon tiny homes that you can buy. So, aside from that, I'm talking about a regular house that is like, foundation in the ground in concrete. I can't just pick that up and walk off with it. Now with equipment though, and part of this is why I'm like a little bit weary of the equipment space. I'm not anti-equipment space, but I'm definitely weary, okay? So with equipment, a lot of times you can just pick it up and take it away, right? So the question is like, how do I know that my collateral is safe and still where I thought it was gonna be without just like always being on top of the borrower, always being in their business or like popping up at their location, right? So I know someone who does tons of equipment loans and they have systems in place to protect against this. For instance, trackers and regular check-in systems and things like that. With real estate, it's really going to depend on what you and the borrower come up with. I've had investors say, hey, if you're in town or if you're local, here's the code to the house. You can always come over. You can see what's going on. You can talk to the workers, whatever, it's up to you. I've also had borrowers be like, yeah, you can regularly check and make sure that everything's good. The property hasn't sold. Like, I mean, I can't sell it because there's the lien here. So, making sure that the asset is still good. But also just having that regular system of, okay, if we're checking in every week and you've been telling me every week that things are good and things are on schedule, like if something catastrophic happens, like, the house burns down, God forbid, or it's been vandalized, which this actually happened in the middle of one of my loans. The investors fix and flip project was vandalized. Like someone broke in and stole a bunch of materials, right? I mean, they were caught, but it was all super dramatic, okay? Now, these are things that can happen. And if you have a communication plan in place and contingency plans and appropriate insurance and things like that, you should be fine, okay? But these are things you have to think about ahead of time, right? So, what we want to do is set up a system for monitoring. We don't want to be micromanaging the borrower. I don't know a borrower who enjoys being micromanaged. I've heard many investors and borrowers express how stressed they can be when private money lenders are anxious about their funds. And a lot of it is with, very new lenders. This is their first loan. They're freaked out. They don't even know like if they did the right thing. They're calling all the time. They're texting all the time. Like we want to avoid that. Okay. So keep your nerves calm. Do some meditation. It's okay. Right. So really finding that balance between monitoring and micromanaging and setting up systems that can help reduce your stress. So again, a clear communication system, a clear check-in system, clear risk management strategies and tactics, right? Do you have the appropriate insurance? Have you secured the loan? Did you do your proper due diligence? How's everything looking, right? So if the more you do on the front end to protect yourself and make sure you're actually in a good investment, the less stressful it's going to be, right? And the more protection you're going to feel, okay? So the time between when the money is funded and the payments are coming in, this is what's going on. The loan's being monitored, the borrower's project is being monitored, everything's going good. You keep calm and lend on.